the theory of Ibn Khaldun. Yani Ibn Khaldun speaks a lot about what happens to nations and groups and organizations, and this is adopted. His theories are adopted in top management. In fact, his book, the introduction, Muqaddimat Ibn Khaldun, was studied by President Reagan, and he gave it as a present to President Carter when he was elected. And he said to him, I followed a lot of the advice from this Bedouin, and my advice to you, read what he says about taxing and about how to run a society. Of course, Ibn Khaldun had a lot of very interesting ideas about the rise of nations and the fall of nations. And the idea is that you actually, because of the connectiveness of many problems around the world, they can cause your curve to come down. Unless you have some other solutions to try to keep things going, and it's just naturally it will come down. So what can happen is, if you look at the present here, you've got some, and that is what we call Horizon 1. Today, if you just run as usual, like if we have a university, say, and this university has got problems. And what it tends to do, you plan and you do things to keep things going, but try to improve it, right? But then what may happen is that it will continue to go down, and then you're in trouble. So that's Horizon 1. What you want actually is to go to what we call Horizon 3, which is the future. That future needs to have plans to get there. Some of the things that you do today, right, they are a combination of things that you are maintaining, keeping things as they are, and a lot of people who are happy of their comfort zone, they will say, I'm happy, you don't want to change. They don't like anybody to come and do any change, right? So Horizon 1 people always don't like change, and they go down. So if you get fragmented sort of innovations and try to help and things and so on, and we're fine, but try to improve this, improve that. And then you get some people who have got innovation, they've got good ideas, but like revolutionary ideas. Try to you get new things done so that they can, this curve, they're not aware of that, but they change the status quo and try to get something done. There is struggle between Horizon 1 people and Horizon 2 people. Right. Horizon 2 people see what's the future, and then they come and say to their management that you've got to change. And the management says, well, I'm going to change, we're doing fine. Why do we have to change? There's always struggle between the two. The guys who look outside and the future, and the guys who are happy with the inside and manage today. And then you've got the single planet living, right? People don't realize that they're going to exhaust the environment and all the problems that comes with it is going to affect your project in the long run. And then you've got this Horizon 3, people who are aware of what's happening and they want to save the world. Everything they do is linked with saving energy, linked with saving the ecosystem, and so on. These people, their organization and their planning and so on will be what we call Horizon 3. And that can happen in every organization at any level, even in this mosque. And so this will develop the future, and then what we call the adaptive imperative. And then at the end, you get a lot of organizations and a lot of people who believe that we should adjust our organization, adjust our development, adjust our planning so that we can live comfortably in this planet. All right? The things you do, small things in here today, it's like switching the light on or off, or the amount of water you use, right? The amount of energy you use, all has to do with your attitude about single planet living. We will discover later that the early Muslims, when they lived, their families, the women, the men, their conduct, they were not aware of all the important needs now, but the way they lived actually encouraged one planet living. We'll see that in a minute. So let's sort of make a move on. The world, like any project, normally any big project has got 12 very important factors that needs to be identified. And these factors, like in this case, you've got the cultural values and your worldview. In any organization, you have a certain mental model and your ideas and so on. This has to govern that organization. And the same thing in government, same thing in, in continents and so on. Then you've got health and well-being of people. Then you've got food and agriculture. You've got business and trade, energy and the earth resources, climate change, the intensity and the rate at which climate can change. And then you've got the ecosystem, so the services. And then you've got the water availability, the habitat and the infrastructure, the economy and the wealth, and the governance and how it is instituted. And then you've got the community, whether this community is flexible and is it resilient or is it very brittle, they don't like to change, and then they will resist any change and so on. And that becomes a brittle community. So the resilience, which is a measure of their ability to adapt of the community, is called resilience. Every one of those factors is linked with the others. What you do in one will affect the others. And that's how complicated it is. And the way these factors interact with each other, they could produce positive and fast change, or it can produce negative and very quick collapse. It depends on how they combine and interact with each other. So all these factors, to be healthy, and to be dynamic, right, and they should be balanced, so that there is dynamic balancing with each other as challenges and shocks arise. A big earthquake may happen in Japan and produce a nuclear catastrophe. What's going to happen to the world? Right? When Chernobyl happened, it has affected everybody in the world. And then, these things do affect. Then the economic system, then the banking collapsing system, and so on. It really has these, and as soon as one affects the other and it changes, the other changes, and so you've got and there are a lot of methods of how. Well, we've got what we call a world game. This world game are played by 12 people, and each of them represents one represents the climate, one represents, and you are sitting in management and you want to organize your school, or organize your university, organize your hospital, or any project. When you go on and train to use this as a game, it will make you aware of the potential consequences that can take place, and that will make you a better manager, I hope. Anyway, so the only way to try to save the world and have high quality development is that we must work together. You can't do it singly. And this working together requires understanding and requires cultural respect and so on. How do you relate to the others so that you are working together? Whether you are in one organization or you are in multiple organizations all across the world. And there is what we've developed a thinking tool, which is called Be the Future tool. I can't go into details with it, but it just tells you that it came out after studies in cybernetics and looking at the characteristics of remarkable people who have been very remarkable throughout history and now. And you look at their characters and see what they did in their life, you'll find that they all fit in this. Can't go into details, but they were able to adjust their mental model when they re-perceive a situation. When they see something and they look at it, they understand it, and then what they do is that when it changes their attitude, it changes their mental model, and then when mental model changes, they were able to adopt an attitude. And this attitude, when it is adopted, it is then communicated to others. And when you communicate it to others, then you begin to organize, and so on. So most of the remarkable people, men or women, they were able, you can fit them in here. You can actually get remarkable people in Oman, and so on. Then you can actually fit these in. There are a lot of layers of this. We can't get into that. We have a management course, what we call youth leaders course, that we give, which predominantly is about that and how they can, be the future course. Now let's move on to where history comes in and Muslim heritage comes in. How does Muslim heritage fit in development? Before focusing much into it, let's just get some examples of what I think they are developments, right, in our modern times. Yesterday I mentioned Al-Biruni. I will mention Al-Biruni today again for some other incident. Al-Biruni, I mentioned him when he has mentioned about Rehana, the lady who has been helping him, right, to produce all this phenomenal work that he has produced, about 200 books, and measured all sorts of mechanics and astronomy and so on. These people, they depict him as that picture on the left, bottom left, number 2. I doubt whether he looked like that. But anyway, he was born 1973 and he died in 1050, right? Almost 1,000 years ago. And he's developed enormous knowledge in various fields, in astronomy, in math, geodesy, observatories, and astrolabes, social anthropology, and he has done a lot of work on the concept of science and faith. Many people are interested in the subject. You can read some of his work about science and faith. What I like to refer to is an incident where he has predicted the circumference of the earth. He has done some theoretical calculations using trigonometry and the movement of the stars, and because he believes that the earth is spherical, he has predicted the arc length of 1 degree and then multiplied it by 360 times, so they get 360 and get them more. He conducted experiment using people and to do pacing and measurements and so on, moving on opposite directions, so he's got some measurements. When he compared the measurements with the theoretical predictions, they were different. And he wanted to repeat the experiment. It's a big experiment. Involves a lot of people. But he says, unfortunately, I couldn't do this experiment because the waqif, the sponsor, has died. Now I caught in on that one. So there is a waqif here. 1,000 years ago, somebody funds Al-Biruni to measure the circumference of the earth. Now this is really incredible. Now I always mention this example because I think it just tells you, first of all, he says waqif, right? That means somebody who is giving money fi sabilillah, right? It is a religious act. It is not an investment for money. He did not go there for a sponsor so that this sponsor will make money out of this project. There is no money out of this project. And not many people even will know, right? So sponsoring for being recognized and being appreciated for advertisement purposes, not even that element. Can you imagine if I come and ask you as a rich lady or as a rich person and say, today, after 1,000 years, and say, can you give me $10 million to go and measure the circumference of the earth? Yeah. I think you'll say that, yeah, go to somebody else. What has measuring the circumference of the earth to do with life? Right. So that kind of incident tells us that the awqaf system in Muslim heritage was a much wider scope of work and function than what I have been taught about today. Because when you mention the word waqf, you think about a masjid, right? Maybe perhaps a hospital or a school. You put some project in shops and so on and hire, and that's what the waqf is. But when you look at the role of waqf, and that's another subject which we are also working on, to look at the role of awqaf in Muslim heritage throughout Muslim history in development, in actually developing science and technology and medicine and the development. The real secret of Muslim civilization was funding And the funding was not done all by governments. Sometimes the government have a good khalifa or a good king or good so on, and then he will encourage people and take some of his money, which he takes from Beit al-Mal, and give it to some of these projects, endowments. But in general, it's the public, those people who have money, their understanding of the outlets of Amal al-Salih is much wider. Now, so the Waqf Foundation and the Waqf institution is a key in the Muslim civilization development. When you look at what's happening in the West, you find that the role of charity organizations and the grants, that's also based on the same system. Well, you know about Harvard University, right? You know about Stanford University, Oxford University, Cambridge University. All these universities, they were through donations and sponsorship of endowment of some families or a rich person. A guy called Harvard, he has money as well. And same as Stanford and others. So the idea here that when the public gets involved in the development of the future of the society, things work well. And that has come from the early Muslim civilization. Unfortunately, what happened later on is that the Muslims have become highly centralized because of the wars and so on, and they have to depend a lot on government. And the Awqaf system has become so small and shrunk, and in many places the Awqaf have been controlled by the government. And this control was for a good reason, because it has to be looked after, it has to be managed, it has to be efficiently run. But what happens, the disadvantage is that the organic nature of expansion of Awqaf did not continue. And therefore the Awqaf became more like a single institution organized and managed and directed by government rather than an independent system on its own. So the idea of Awqaf is to sponsor the improvement of the quality of life of people. You get orphans, give them livelihood so they can, making schools so that people get educated. Education was the most important, function in the Muslim civilization. People have to learn. Right? Many hadiths in the Quran, and even in the Quran and ayat, encourages the believers to seek knowledge. Seek knowledge, even if it is from the kafir, right? I mean, when there's seek knowledge, even if it's from China, right? Some people say this hadith is not very sahih, but because it is hasan, but we can mention it, we can use it because it actually tells you two things. One is that even if it was as far as China, so you have to, even if it's very long in that case, but also has the meaning of China. China wasn't a Muslim in those days. So, there are two things in this hadith. One is that the distance, and therefore very, much effort has to be given, and then it's the fact that it's coming from non-Muslims. So these two tell us that al-hikmatu dhallatul mu'min, the hikmah, wisdom and knowledge is the lost camel of a believer. The seeking of knowledge, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. That's another hadith. Right? Some people say there was some slight changes in this, but طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة even. Right? And seeking of knowledge is compulsory, right? As a religious compulsory duty to seek knowledge by every Muslim male and female. So this idea here, it brings in this education, and it tells you how much it has affected people. I come again to Al-Biruni. He's my favorite guy. When he was in his deathbed, I mentioned this story before, when he was, in 92 years of age and he was dying, and then somebody comes from another town trying to say salam to him, and then Al-Biruni, when he heard who was coming, he tried to stand in respect to greet him. He couldn't. So he said to him, please, I have been looking for you for the last so many years. You have a solution to this problem, and please tell me what it is. And when he told him what the problem was, it was a mathematical problem. Mathematical problem. A man is dying, right? What was he going to do with the mathematical problem? The solution of the mathematical problem. But then when he realized that people are wondering, what's this question? So he turned and he says, what, كيف بي يعني إذا قابلت ربي وقيض لي فرصة التعلم أحيانا what would I say to my Creator when He has given me an opportunity to learn and I have refused it? So seeking of knowledge, and it was part of a faith process. Seeking of knowledge is part of faith. It is a religious duty. And people understood that. And they behaved accordingly. And even to the deathbed. This is remarkable. I now go on to development in another. That was development of education. It shows you why there were so many polymaths like Al-Biruni, men and women. Knowledge and knowledge, and they go. And how the books used to be established. Thousands of books. How did they travel? People, when they go from Baghdad, he has some books with him or with her. And while they're going to Damascus, they're working on the road. They don't just go and sit in their own homes. No, while they're traveling. And then when they reach Damascus, they will be giving their books they have finished, and they replace them with another set. And then they reach somewhere else, the same thing happens. They go to Mecca, same exchange of books and manuscripts has been happening like this throughout the world through traveling. That's why you find them, they're spread everywhere. You never know where you find a book because of this homogeneity of distribution through the travel system. Now let me get to the incident that is also very striking. Everybody knows about Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he said, I fear that Allah may hold me accountable, right, for a stone on the path of a camel going to the Yemen or going to Baghdad. This is amazing. Can you think about this? There's a Khalifa whose armies and the fastest rate of expansion, it's just going like an explosion out of Arabia into Iraq, Syria, and Egypt, and so on in his time. They're going everywhere. And then he says, I'm worried about if there is a stone on the path. Now, this kind of thinking, lest an animal trip over it. It is not that so that people trip over. No, he's worried about the animal. This is civil engineering.